Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm joined by Joyce. And Joyce, it's time for another edition of Oscars Playback. There's nothing like a dame, and there's nothing like looking back at the 1999 Academy Awards.
And this one was on a Sunday.
Moved to a Sunday.
We moved to a Sunday. It was on Sunday, March 21st, 1999, the 71st Academy Awards for the films of 98.
So we have done now 3 in a row, basically, of the years, right? We did 97 Oscars, which is Independence Day, and English Patient won. Last week we did Titanic, and this was the follow-up Titanic. Titanic, the biggest Oscars ever. This one somehow longer. It clocked in at 4 hours and 2 minutes. Ratings dipped to 45 million viewers.
But, I remember watching this live back then, and it's still at 4 hours and 2 minutes, felt faster than this past ceremony a month ago. So
it certainly did. A lot of content, and having rewatched a lot of it on YouTube, there's just a ton of content. It's a very long show, but it was, chock full of multiple tributes to deceased legends like Frank Sinatra, Gene Autry, Stanley Kubrick, Roy Rogers.
Love his sandwiches and burgers.
An honorary Oscar for Elia Kazan, which was a hot bit of controversy. You have Whoopi Goldberg doing extended bits as the host. She came in for Billy Crystal. I want to start there, actually. I went back.
This is our first non-Billy ceremony.
It's our first non-Billy ceremony, and I went back after watching last night, and I was like, when I was watching, I was like, wow, Whoopi Goldberg is so good at hosting the Oscars. That was one of my big takeaways. I think she's so funny, and she really understands how to run the room. And all the reviews after were like, she sucked. I was actually surprised, and like how she was, crass, because it's again at the height of the Clinton era, the Clinton scandal.
Another Linda Tripp joke.
Another Linda Tripp joke, references to Monica Lewinsky and the dress and all these different things. So the jokes are like what you would expect from that. But I actually thought she was great. And I think one of the things I noticed when we were watching the Titanic one, a lot of Billy's hosting at that point was all about Billy. Like his sixth time, I believe, was that one the year before.
And he didn't even want to do it. And he was very adamant about doing it this year.
It was readily apparent he did not want to do it. And it was mostly just about Billy not wanting to do it and not necessarily as much about the movies. This one was Whoopi like really having a fun time. I thought she was really strong. She referenced a lot of, like you said, like the controversies of the ceremony, which included the Elia Kazan honorary Oscar that was protested heavily outside because obviously he testified against his fellow Hollywood collaborators in front of the House.
Outed them back in the day.
Yes.
And never apologized.
Never apologized. And then she even referenced a thing we'll spend a lot of time talking about, Joyce. I wrote this down in her monologue. DreamWorks and Miramax, those boys fought World War III over World War II. Because this is, I would say, a transitional Oscars in the sense that this is the most like current Oscars that I think we had gotten to. This is the modern Oscars.
Well, this Oscars ushered in this modern Oscars or this era because of Harvey.
Right.
So changed the game, really.
So yes. So this was definitely the ascendant, the culmination, I would say, of Harvey Weinstein's like run as the Oscars.
Yeah, because Miramax was peaking. Well, I mean, he personally won an Oscar.
Right. He was a producer on Shakespeare in Love, so he personally won an Oscar. Shakespeare in Love was a movie that was set up at Universal in the late 80s and early 90s with Edward Zwick as a producer, and had a bunch of different permutations. I was reading Inside Oscar last night, Joyce. They sounded really fun. I had actually never read those before. One of them was Julia Roberts as the Gwyneth Paltrow character, and Daniel Day-Lewis as Shakespeare, which I was like, I'm in on that movie in 1990. Wow, that would have been awesome. And then another iteration was Winona Ryder and Kenneth Branagh in those parts. And it ended up not happening at Universal, and Miramax came in and put in a ton of money to finish it, basically. And Harvey's grabbed the producer credit. Obviously, in the years since, Harvey Weinstein has been arrested, was convicted of felony sex crime and rape. He was sentenced to 23 years in jail, and the entire ceremony has been cast under that light, I think, and like how his bullying tactics on the campaign maybe it spread into real life. Plus, Gwyneth Paltrow accused him of sexual misconduct and obviously won an Oscar for this movie. Her speech literally made me like weep. I was texting you this last night. It's like Gwyneth Paltrow's speech was just really touching, I thought, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm crying at this silly Oscars.
Well, I
But
mean,
I did.
you cry all the time. So what
I
else?
do. I do. But this
But
is the
like
first
her,
time.
well,
I
her
got
speech is also, I mean, obviously she thanks him, but now we know, like, you know, like, what happened between them, like when she was making Emma 2 years before.
yes. So
You
that
know.
was all of it. I found it. There's a Vanity Fair article, Joyce, by former Vanity Fair writers Rebecca Keegan and Nicole Sperling, both of whom have gone on to other outlets. I think Rebecca is at the Hollywood Reporter, our sister site here, and then Nicole's at the Times. But I had a quote here from Mark Gill, who is Miramax's LA president. He said, "The movie is still great about Shakespeare in Love. The individual achievements are still remarkable, but you can't possibly look at it through the same lens anymore. You just can't." Well, not wrong, but the movie is still great, like you said.
I love the movie, and my favorite movie is Shakespeare, not Shakespeare in Love, Saving Private Ryan. But I'm totally fine with Shakespeare in Love winning Best Picture, which so many people do not believe when I say that.
So this is an interesting. So this whole ceremony I found so interesting. Again, this is another year where I think we talked about last week. The 97 movies were some of my favorites of all time. We went through them all. This year, not as many all-time faves, but a lot of great movies. And a lot of movies. Again, I saw every one of these in the movie theater. Armageddon still rocks. The top grossing movie of the year. Michael Bay, Ben Affleck, ascendant off of Good Will Hunting.
The only thing better than Armageddon is the commentary for Armageddon.
Yes,
Ben
it's incredible.
Affleck.
Ben
Give him an
Affleck
Oscar for that.
Ben Affleck, truly a lack of Fs. No, he does not care at all.
It's so good. And I felt bad for Deep Impact because that was, you know, the big battle.
Yeah, but Deep Impact was not good.
Yeah, I felt bad for Mimi Leader. So.
Mimi Leader should have gotten more shots, but the movie compared to Armageddon doesn't work. Saving Private Ryan, which we'll talk about a ton, obviously, the number 2 grossing movie a year, was a tremendous hit. I remember seeing it in opening weekend, and just the theater was like dead silent. Like I could remember the silence. That's how in awe people were over the emotion of the movie and the opening sequence and all of the things. It remains a great movie. I know you stayed up. We're recording this on Wednesday. You stayed up in the wee morning hours watching it last night.
Because it's my favorite movie, and I don't watch it that often anymore. Like I've seen Shakespeare in Love more times in the past decade than Saving Private Ryan. And I think like recently, I'll plug one of our writers, Kevin Jacobson. He hosts a podcast called And the Runner Up Is, about probable Oscar runners up. Currently doing Best Actress, but it started with Best Picture. And I was on the Saving Private Ryan episode like 4 years ago. So I rewatched it for that. So if you want my in-depth thoughts on this race, you can go listen to that.
I will go listen.
Yeah. And yeah, so I after I watched like all the clips of the ceremony last night, I don't watch the Best Picture win often for obvious reasons. And I think the last time I watched that was like in 2017 after the Time story on like Harvey and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, so I watched all the clips, and then I was like, I want to watch Saving Private Ryan right now. And it was like 10:30. And I started it. Went to bed at 1:30 in the morning. And it's still my favorite movie. It's I watched it opening weekend in the theater. My theater, I don't think it was as quiet as yours because people were still eating popcorn. Are you saying like no one was eating popcorn?
I honestly don't remember. I mean, like it's a memory from 20 years to 25 years ago, whatever it is. But I don't remember a thing. I think we saw it in the city, honestly, because I think it was like a bigger deal thing that we wanted to go into this, even though it was in the summer, because it came out obviously as a summer movie.
Yeah, it came out July 24th.
And I remember like it was just dead quiet. I don't remember popcorn at all. It was just a wonderful experience. And we watched that movie a lot when it came out on home release.
Oh my God. So yeah, I instantly fell in love with Saving Private Ryan. And then I was just waiting for it to come on pay-per-view, you know, my go-to.
Yes, obviously.
And then I watched it like literally every day for a full year. And I also recorded it on VHS, like full credits and everything. And then I bought it when it was released, like officially. And then I eventually got the DVD. And then my friend eventually got me like the 60th anniversary of D-Day edition.
Wow, nice.
For my birthday. Yeah. So I have like multiple copies of Saving Private Ryan. And yeah, and I was like ready for it to win Best Picture.
So I remember rooting for Shakespeare in Love because I love the chaos of the underdog and as we've seen,
You're just like Harvey.
You read the Inside Oscar and reading this Vanity Fair article, it's like, it's a manufactured underdog. The movie was like,
yeah, totally,
obviously not a legitimate underdog and had like a ton of nominations. I think it had 13 nominations, Joyce. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a favorite. Had Shakespeare in Love, Saving Private Ryan had 11 nominations, only 11 nominations by comparison. So it was like a runaway thing. And I think a lot of the things we see now, where about the previously when we've gone into this, like obviously, like Silence of the Lambs came out in February, kind of able to withstand a whole year. Fargo was a movie that came out in March, withstood a whole year. There was not as much of this like late Johnny Come Lately movie coming in at the end and like getting people riled up with emotions. But Shakespeare in Love was absolutely that, where it's like came out late in the year. They had barely done any screenings, I think, up until like closer to release. It was one of, I think, 6 movies that Miramax was releasing in December to try to like figure out which one would end up being their number one contender. They ended up with Life is Beautiful and Shakespeare in Love as their 2. Both played heavily on emotions and immediate impact rather than long-lasting appeal. And it just was a perfect storm, I feel like, of events where it's like, oh, Shakespeare in Love is absolutely a better movie than Coda, but it is the same blueprint that helped Coda beat Power of the Dog by
Oh yeah,
easy.
totally. It's and I love that this year we also had The Truman Show, because I'm talking about The Truman Show for the second time in a month, because if you missed our final Oscar predictions last month, I hearkened to The Truman Show to explain why Coda was going to win Best Picture, or more that why Power of the Dog was going to lose Best Picture, really. But yeah, again, exactly that. So it was because it was a mutual friend or a friend of a friend,
right,
revealed that she did not understand The Truman Show, which I don't think is that difficult to understand, but she was expecting like a typical Jim Carrey comedy, like Ace Ventura or whatever. And so like we like a month ago explained it to her, and like she still wasn't like really getting it, and she was like, I just want like funny Jim Carrey, and that was not what I got from The Truman Show. And that's basically, like Coda and Power of the Dog, and also like Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan. It's like, it's a big emotional play. Like that was like the Miramax MO. It just makes you feel. And, one of the taglines or their campaign slogans for Shakespeare in Love was like the crowd pleaser of the year.
Absolutely a crowd pleaser. Yeah. Absolutely played into the narcissism of Hollywood, because it's about like making a movie, basically, even though it's obviously set in Shakespearean.
In the Globe, they're putting on a show in the Globe.
And the other thing this ushered in was, again, and mentioned in the Vanity Fair article, and just obviously if you have 2 eyes, Harvey Weinstein is, in addition to being a convicted rapist, is a incredible bully. He was celebrated for being a bully. And in this race, that was another major factor of it, where it wasn't just him forcing Shakespeare in Love down the throats of Academy members. I think in this article, it's like they did spend 3 months doing press with the cast. This was one of the first movies to get a VHS screener out, I think, or like at the time, like
they sent like 50,000 VHSs to SAG or something.
And so it was like ascendant in that regard. So it got people feeling like exclusive, that they were able to do this. He did a lot of those things. He also ran a strong negative campaign against DreamWorks and Shakespeare and Saving Private Ryan, specifically that the movie's only the first 15 minutes, who cares, blah, blah, blah. It's not, the rest of the movie doesn't work. And like starting those whisper campaigns, again, very similar to what we see now, where it's like Power of the Dog, kind of boring. And it ends up working its way into the Oscar host monologue this year, right? Where it's like Wanda Sykes is taking a cheap shot at the length.
No, it's like, it's long, and it's like, as we've talked about before, it's one of the shorter films.
So, all of these things are like spawned in this ceremony. It's just wild looking at it.
Yeah, and then because of that, DreamWorks obviously had to retaliate.
Right.
Like a counterattack. So then they had to overspend as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but then it's funny because like their campaign just hinged on like, we have to honor the veterans, like these heroes, which is kind of what like eventually Harvey would do with like Imitation Game, like honor the man.
There was that line here from Terry Press from who's DreamWorks and the DreamWorks later. He was like, they tried to get everybody to believe the Saving Private Ryan was all in the first 15 minutes. And he told that to Steven Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg was quoted as saying, "I do not want you to get down in the mud with Harvey." So when they go low, Steven Spielberg goes high. That at least here,
Michelle Obama, that's where she got it.
He
from.
definitely was the presage of Michelle Obama here for what happened. The one thing I will say, like all of the way this ceremony is toxic, I will say, like, I was surprised how while Shakespeare in Love won so many awards, I felt like Harvey was a bigger presence the year prior because he was like in the front row for Good Will Hunting and like a multiple participant. And while he was actually on stage here at the end for Shakespeare in Love and giving an acceptance speech, he was not necessarily as big of a factor. I felt like within the ceremony itself, he was set further back in the crowd. They didn't really show him that much, at least in the clips I saw. So I was like, it is interesting that this is like the Harvey Oscars for sure, I think, if you're looking at it, but he was not as much of a factor as the Good Will Hunting year for whatever reason.
I think it's also, I'm not saying like he requested to be sat in the front row or anything, but like he knew like Titanic was winning that year, right? Even though like all his like talk and bluster was like, you never know, like there's the underdog and stuff. But I think he was probably feeling really good this year. I mean, obviously they ended up winning, but like he knew like they really pulled out all the stops to cross the line at the end.
Did you notice, again, you were a better reader than I am, so you read all of Inside Oscar, a chapter on this. I only read the
I paused to watch Saving Private Ryan, and then I
paused to fall asleep and then did not come back to it. But there is a part in it where Harvey was quoted as saying that this year he was like, at least publicly, while he was waging a silent, neg campaign against Saving Private Ryan with voters, publicly he was like, all 5 of these movies that were nominated for Best Picture are great movies. And I wasn't a fan of Titanic last year. And I'm reading that after we went back and looked and read about how James Cameron like almost beat the hell out of him with his Oscar. I was like, I wonder if that was more about that interaction than the actual movie. Because I was like, why would he neg Titanic like that? But I was like, maybe that was actually it. But who knows? The other nominees Joyce, were Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan, like we said, and then Elizabeth, Life is Beautiful, and The Thin Red Line. So a huge difference between what we saw the year prior when you had a lot of big hits and like populist movies. Here we have a lot of...
Here you have 3 World War II movies and 2 Elizabethan movies.
Yes, and only one of these was really a hit at the time. Saving Private Ryan was a huge hit, obviously. Shakespeare in Love ended up becoming a massive hit off of this. I think at the time of the nominations, it had only grossed like less than 40 million. But I mean, it ended up, for the year, it was the 9th movie worldwide. It grossed $289 million. It was another huge hit, and it was really everywhere. I saw that in the theater as well, obviously, but I think more closer to opening weekend than like in March or April.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because like Saving Private Ryan domestically was the top grossing film, and it's 2nd worldwide. And I'm just thinking like that wouldn't happen today, like if it was released now.
I mean, it's a war movie, so who knows? I don't think it would either, but I don't think it would do poor. None of these other ones.
It would not be number 1 for the year.
None of these other ones would have done. I mean, like, we'll talk about Life is Beautiful is a movie that I remember also enjoying at the time. I was swept up in the emotion of it, but I would not.
I was never into Life.
And I mean, the wins are just aged like milk. And then Elizabeth, I feel like, is a movie that's totally fine.
Totally
was never
fine.
into it.
And then like no one asked for that sequel, and they did it.
And then The Thin Red Line, again, I saw that in the theater and was in the Inside Oscar. They talk about like how people were like, get out of here with this compared to Saving Private Ryan. I remember it was a big deal because it was Terrence Malick's first film in like 20 years. And he was so reclusive that they still had the same still photo of Terrence Malick that if you Google Terrence Malick, it was there at the Oscars. And then when they did the Best Director lineup, because he was a nominee there as well, it just says it's just a photo of the empty director's chair.
I know.
So I remember being like really excited because while I wasn't like Mr. Terrence Malick fan, I was like, wow, that's really cool that this guy's just come out of nowhere after 20 years of being a recluse and made this movie. And then we remember sitting through it and being like, holy cow, especially off Saving Private Ryan. It's so slow.
Yeah, it's just very
ephemeral.
Yeah, like and philosophical and just not what you would expect from a war movie.
No. So those are the nominees. And I the thing is, we've talked about like we've been talking about this, like Saving Private Ryan is a great movie. I have not rewatched that recently, but it was definitely one of my favorite movies. I rewatched Shakespeare in Love recently, and it's still really
I
an
love Shakespeare in
entertaining.
Love.
It's a really
Yeah.
entertaining movie. It really is. It's very easy to see how people were like wrapped up into its feeling and enthusiasm and emotion. And I think it does, like you said, it is a good movie, and even you missed the number one Saving Private Ryan fan, like Shakespeare in Love. But I think if you ask people now, like when there's an Oscar injustice, I do feel like it is kind of mentioned at least somewhat in the same breath as some of the other ones that we've seen.
And I don't think it deserves to be.
No.
And so this is the thing, because I think even like my friends who don't follow any of the stuff, like Shakespeare in Love gets put on these lists all the time as like worst Oscar wins or like biggest Oscar mistakes, like a crash or whatever. And I don't think it deserves to be. Like, I think it's a fine winner. Do I wish it wasn't competing against Saving Private Ryan? Yes. And I will admit, like, when it happened, like in 1999, when it won, I was like upset, but I was more upset that Saving Private Ryan lost than Shakespeare in Love won, even though I didn't watch it for a while after that. But it was more like I'm angry at the voters for not voting for Saving Private Ryan. Like, I'm not angry that Shakespeare in Love won, because I really love the movie. And if it's on TV, it's on TV more often than Saving Private Ryan, I will watch both of them if they're on TV, and I will watch it. Like, I love the score, amazing score, listen to it all the time. And
the score is unbelievable.
But I feel like because it's taken on this narrative that like this is one of the worst Oscar injustices, that I've had to defend it to the point where there have been times where I'm like, it should have won over Saving Private Ryan. Like, I would have voted for Saving Private Ryan to win, and I think it deserves to win. But I think Shakespeare in Love is still a perfectly fine winner.
Yeah, I think I actually would have voted for Shakespeare in Love. Like I said, I was rooting for it at the time just because I liked the chaos and like the narrative that was sold to the press. I was very into an underdog winning. I like it when underdogs win, especially. And I do think while all of the stuff we've been talking about how like the modern Oscar campaign was like launched here and all of the backbiting and stuff that we see, the other thing I think was that Titanic, having won the year before, was just a juggernaut and like an obvious winner and very much a favorite in this big spectacle. And I think having Saving Private Ryan right on top of that, it just kind of felt like a little bit like, can't we have something else? And the Shakespeare in Love was something else, right? Like that kind of thing. Even though Shakespeare in Love as a premise is a lot more like Titanic because of like the story.
And like they both play on huge emotions.
But I do think that like there is like the spectacle aspect of Saving Private Ryan, which is so incredible and like was like a big selling point of the movie. And then Shakespeare in Love is just this light kind of airy rom-com, basically. I remember thinking it was really funny that they made a big deal about how it was like the first comedy to win Best Picture in quite a long time. And I still don't think of it as a comedy to me. I don't know. I have a different definition of comedy. There are amusing elements to it for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like the dramedies at the Emmys.
Yes. But it was like, that was like another runner where it was like, oh, it's not going to win because it's only a comedy, right? Like that was again a neg against the movie. It was like, again, Shakespeare in Love it is a funny movie.
Like there are elements of it that does not fit in the usual like Best Picture winner box. Like it is a romance. They don't like, we have back-to-back romances win basically. And it's a female lead. So after that, like, Hilary Swank and $1 Million Baby won, and then we didn't get another Best Picture, Best Actress winner until Nomadland.
Pretty wild. It's like, it's just watching the way the industry has shifted is disconcerting, I would say.
Yeah. So I think like it's not a traditional winner totally, but, and I guess you could say like Saving Private Ryan is, because it's a war film, but I also don't think it's like your usual war film either, because the huge big spectacle action sequence is in the beginning.
Right.
And then it's kind of talky through it all. Like they're just searching for this dude through the rest
I would
of the
say,
movie.
I agree with you. I don't think the injustice is that Saving Private Ryan lost. I think there is a much, much bigger injustice around Saving Private Ryan that we'll probably get to when we get through the categories, because I was just, again, watching it last night, the ceremony, which you can watch on YouTube. It's just like, how do we fall into this? What happened here? We'll get to that. So Joyce, so we said Whoopi was host 4-hour show. There's 45 million viewers, and I was reading a thing. I forget if it was Inside Oscar or something else. Oh, it was here. It was after the show. Bill Carter wrote an article for the New York Times about it, and they were complaining about the length. The ABC Michael Davies, an ABC executive in charge of the broadcast, a 4-hour and 7-minute Oscar show is obviously too long. They're already just dunking on this immediately. Talked about how the movies weren't great. The guy praised Whoopi, and then here's a couple of things that, again, I think it's hilarious reading this in 1999 and then thinking of it now. Mr. Davies said harsh criticism of the show and the host was becoming an issue for the producers. It's becoming more and more difficult to persuade anyone to do these programs, he said. With ratings down from last year when Titanic's dominance brought hordes of teenage viewers with it, Mr. Davies suggested something he would like to see in next year's show. This is the ABC executive, quote, lots of nominations for the Star Wars sequel. I mean, what are we doing here? Every year it's the same story.
The Star Wars sequel. You mean prequel?
He meant prequel. It's the Phantom Menace, because was coming out.
Yeah, it was coming out in 99.
Coming out a couple of months after this ceremony. Liam Neeson was at this ceremony. It just makes me laugh reading this, because I'm like, this is off of 40. What did I say it was?
45 million.
45 million viewers, and they're like,
which they'll never hit again.
They're like, oh man, we're in crisis mode. No one's gonna host it. They don't want to host. We got to get Star Wars.
No one's watching. We lost all the Leo fans.
The show is too long, and then now it's like, here's 12 million people. Good luck.
We're gonna cut 8 categories. It'll be great.
Unbelievable. So Whoopi was Joyce. You wrote down a couple of things. We love this. Is another one where they have the introductions on the red carpet. The start. Mm-hmm. You sent me one. I think
they really need to bring those back.
Here are the ones I wrote down. You tell me what you got. But I have a double Oscar winner and still photographer, Kevin
that
Costner.
was the first one I did.
He's got a Kodak disposable again, taking pictures. This one I love. Best screenplay Oscar winners and buddies, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And then popular actor Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
That one rules.
I also have Patrick Stewart, Star Trek star and respected British actor.
Amazing.
And then world famous Oscar winning director Steven Spielberg. They love calling out how famous Steven Spielberg is, because they did that in the Silence of the Lambs show as well.
And I forget who it was. I think Robin Williams, when he comes out to give out Best Supporting Actress, he's on fire. He's like riffing and stuff. It's just a totally different Robin Williams than you saw when he actually won. He was so mannered, I thought, when he won for Good Will Hunting. This year he comes out, he's just ripping. And I think he did a thing about evacuating the theater, and he was like Steven Spielberg first, and then everybody else just good luck, basically. Like, that was the joke. Again, love having Steven Spielberg there, because it was like, he is Hollywood royalty. Here he is.
And then another one, beautiful star of The Mask of Zorro, Catherine Zeta-Jones. They love talking about how gorgeous people are.
It's very retrograde if you watch it. Every actress is beautiful, and then the men are successful. That's how they basically separate it off.
Yeah, and that's also how the voters vote for winners too. Like, because if you're an actress, you're up and coming, you can win. But for the men, you gotta wait until you're accomplished in your 40s.
It's so bad. It's so bad. I will say, so the show opens with Whoopi. She comes out as dressed as the Queen from Shakespeare in Love. She's
the first of 75 times the Shakespeare in Love score is played.
You knew it's like, if you were not sure what was going to win Best Picture, they literally opened the show with a Shakespeare in Love.
Not that we're saying they knew it was going to win.
They didn't know it was going to win, but I mean, like, it was clearly the mania was at its high point. I think people were very excited.
They were not playing the Elizabeth score.
No, they're playing Shakespeare in Love score for Whoopi to come out dressed as Judi Dench, doing a bit about her being the queen. It's very funny. African queen, right? Very funny. It's a good joke, and it's just a great moment. Again, one of those memorable Oscar moments. I think that really stands out, as Whoopi dressed as Judi Dench. It's so great. Then she comes out to do her monologue, and she raps a whole thing about the Clinton scandal, like we said, totally in the I was watching, and I'm like, this is like Bulworth, which was a nominee, and then they cut to Warren Beatty in the crowd, and I'm like, is Warren Beatty like, Whoopi, you're ripping me off? What is this? Like, it's just literally like the Bulworth raps.
Also, I saw Bulworth in the theaters.
Me too. I saw it in Port at the one in town. I don't know if that theater is still open. There was the Cineplex Odeon down in
I
Sound.
think it's still there, isn't it? It's like dilapidated now, but.
And then whatever it was, Uptown was like the different theater, and they had gone through a couple of things, and they changed. I remember they made it more of a multiplex by that time, and so they like made smaller theaters. And I swear to God, the theater I saw Bulworth in was as big as this room. The screen was like the window behind me, and then there
It was
were
a
like
personal screen.
3 rows of seats. Yeah, it was like, okay, I guess we're doing this. But yeah, so there was Warren Beatty there with Bulworth while Whoopi is rapping about Clinton and Lewinsky. She references Elia Kazan, I think, at that point too, right? Because she talks about the blacklist being just her and Hattie McDaniel, which is a great joke. Her jokes are really funny, I thought. She was
and
so
then she called herself like the last 20th century Fox because she's hosting the last Oscar ceremony of the 20th century.
Pretty fun. It's like a little bit of pre-Y2K paranoia and mania. I just loved it so much. I was like, it would have been great. I think there was a rumor that she was maybe suggested as a possible host this year. She obviously hosts The View and ended up in a mired in her own scandal of putting her foot in her mouth. But Whoopi's great. It would be so nice if she ever hosted again. I think she just was really funny.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she does or would do in this era, you know?
Yeah, well, she definitely lost some speed on her fastball, I would argue. This was like peak Whoopi, I feel. They joked already about here. She had one thing. Oh, this was that I wrote down. This is another one I thought you would appreciate. I don't know if you noticed this in her monologue. She goes, "This will be a long show, so we don't want to read about how long it was. Tough." And I'm like, yes, Whoopi, go for it. Like, that's right. It is going to be a long show, and that's what it should be. It's the Oscars.
Is it an Oscar ceremony if they don't talk about how long it's going to be?
No, this one they didn't have as many Gil Cates is going to get mad at me jokes like Billy did. But he was again the producer. Gil Cates came back. Yeah, so why don't we go through? Do you want to start going through the winners and categories? Is anything else here before we get there?
Sure. Best Picture, which I tried to do our thing of filling out what would be the other 5 nominees in expanded field, and I'm just like, I could do like 2 or 3, and then I don't know.
I came up with 3 that I felt were definites, but the nominees, like we had said, to reiterate, Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan, and then Elizabeth, Life is Beautiful, and The Thin Red Line. I would say Life is Beautiful probably ended up being 3rd. Again, just the hysteria around that movie was so high, and it just does not age very well, I would argue, as a win, or in its wins have not necessarily aged very well. And Shakespeare in Love obviously won. Harrison Ford read the nominees and then announced Best Picture,
he really wanted to say Saving Private Ryan.
He did. He's like a sphinx. He's very difficult to read, Harrison Ford, but I could tell he was like a little pissed that he had to read Shakespeare in Love. The other nominees I came up with were The Truman Show.
Yes.
Seemingly was the 6th. Peter Weir was nominated for
directing nominee.
Got Best Screenplay nomination as well, I believe.
Yes, and Ed Harris nominated.
And Ed Harris, and we'll talk about it. I think Jim Carrey probably should have gotten nominated, but so Truman Show, I have Gods and Monsters, felt like a pretty solid 7.
Love Gods and Monsters.
So Bill Condon wins Best Adapted Screenplay for that. It got multiple acting nominations as well. And then I put Out of Sight in there.
Oh my God.
Solely on its screenplay nom.
I love Out of Sight.
It's a great movie.
It's more like a Hope Diction if I put it on. Like,
so what were your other ones? I mean, the other ones I wrote, here are the other movies I wrote down. And again, most of these are like Pleasantville I really love.
Yes, I have Pleasantville. I have There's Something About Mary.
I have Something About Mary also. And I think if it was now with an expanded lineup, it would have gotten in. It feels like the time of movie that actually should have gotten in. And the expanded lineup was made to get in because it's like a populist hit that was actually like critically well received and is actually good.
Yeah. And I also have A Simple Plan, which I like.
So Simple Plan I could have had instead of Out of Sight. That had more of a buzz. Obviously the Billy Bob Thornton performance, and in keeping with this late 90s run that we've been doing, Billy Bob again gets the biggest applause at his nomination when he's nominated for supporting actor.
They just love Billy Bob.
I love that guy. Holy cow, they love him. He's like like what a fave. I wrote down Little
and at this
Voice.
point he's with Laura Dern at this point. So
I wrote down Little Voice, which is another Miramax movie. Brenda Blethyn was nominated for Best Actress. And then I have Rushmore written down.
Yeah, I wrote down Rushmore and Big Lebowski back to back.
And I thought Big Lebowski perhaps, but I actually have another spot where I think Big Lebowski would get honored. That seems more realistic. But it's hard to
Yeah.
come up with like actually like 10 nominees.
Yeah, it would be easier if it were just the sliding scale still. Like I think you could solidly do that with like 2 or 3 others. I also have The Opposite of Sex, which I loved.
Love The Opposite of Sex, and I'll definitely be bringing that up multiple times as we go through later, but I don't think
Yeah.
it would have been a Best Picture nominee. The thing that's funny is, while again, Life is Beautiful is not a movie I would say I've revisited a lot, and I
I
don't
have
feel
not
it's
seen it
aged.
since it came out.
And Elizabeth and Thin Red Line are totally fine movies that I'm just like whatever about in the end. I wouldn't knock any of these Best Picture nominees out probably for any of the movies we just mentioned. Like it feels like this is actually a
Yeah.
step 5.
Yeah, it's fine. I
Totally
don't,
fine.
yeah, totally
Uh,
fine.
you could make the argument for Truman Show, and I think at least Jim Carrey kind of references this, and when he goes up there, I think I forget what he's giving out. Do you let me look.
Editing, I think.
Yes, he does he comes out and does editing and like really dunks on himself, and it's like very self-deprecating. The crowd really likes it, but he's like, I can't believe Roberto Benigni took my Oscar basically, or my Oscar
Yeah,
spot.
or like I got beaten by Roberto Benigni and Roberto's just like hamming it up, like
And
LOL, laughing.
right. And it's like, I do think the late breaking Life is Beautiful did end up pushing out like Truman Show here for Best Picture.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But again, it goes back to that thing. It's like Truman Show, it's a little bit more cerebral, and
Yes.
Life is Beautiful is just like LOL the Holocaust. Let's make it a game.
A lot of LOL the Holocaust, and then
And
like
it was
cry.
just they were that campaign, man. I mean, props to them. They knew what they were doing, like super calculated. Let's just bring this guy over and play up like every Italian like stereotype you could think of.
Yeah, I was like, I remember I
Drum
sent
the
you a text
pants off
last night. I was like,
everyone.
this is problem. This is like this would be like Silvio on The Sopranos being like, this is bad for Italians kind of thing. I think Silvio
Like I
Dante
remember
would
when it
not.
was happening back then, and I was just like, man, like it's like, isn't he tired of like doing all this?
Holy
Like
cow.
every like late night appearance, every interview was like literally the same, but it worked. So
It worked, and he did it during the
yeah.
show. So we said, I mean, I don't know what else we could to say about Best Picture. I feel like it's the headline thing here, but I'm really not outraged that Shakespeare in Love won in the end, understanding how
No,
tainted and
I think
everything is
it's
since. But
fine. And like I wish Saving Private Ryan won, but again, I love Shakespeare in Love as well. And it's you're still comparing art. So it's
right.
hard to compare these two completely different films. And I think it is a win of the moment for Shakespeare in Love. And
Yes.
since then there's been a lot of these like relitigation when people or like outlets ask voters like, if you could redo this vote, like what would you vote for? And some people have said like Saving Private Ryan, I wouldn't. They've done that with like Crash and Brokeback.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I do feel like maybe we should not give out Best Picture the year of. You should wait a couple years when you have more distance.
I mean, that would be wonderful. Or make the people vote before, blindly
Or they
before.
could follow my suggested
Yes.
award season calendar when everyone votes in secret and you stagger the announcements so no one
Correct.
can copy off of each other.
That would be great. I do think it's funny that the Shakespeare in Love, Saving Private Ryan dichotomy is one we've revisited over and over again, but it does feel like we just keep getting a copy of a copy of a copy. So
It's like multiplicity.
It is, and
Yeah.
the later versions get worse and worse, and it just is. So like we
These
said,
are
I
two
think
great movies.
Shakespeare in Love is a great movie, and so is Saving Private Ryan. I think when you look at Crash and Brokeback Mountain as like a prime example, Crash is not a great movie. Brokeback Mountain is a very good movie.
And Paul Haggis himself is like, we should not have won.
And then even like for Green Book and Roma, again, Green Book, not a great movie. And Roma may be a very good movie, not a movie I'm like particularly like passionate about, but it definitely is a better movie than Green Book. And you just keep getting down this line, and it just is very, I don't know if it's amusing or whatever it is, but it's just watching it here. I'm like, oh, well, Shakespeare in Love is a legitimately good movie, and it's not terrible that it won. But because of what has come since, I think people, like you said, are like, Shakespeare in Love is a disastrous win.
Yeah, and it's just taken on this like tag of being one of the worst winners ever. I'm like, it's not, like it's fine. It's like you're more like I was back then, like you're more upset about what it beat. But if you remove it from that, like it's still a good movie. And now obviously it's colored by Harvey Weinstein of it all. But I felt this way even before that. I know some people opinions have changed since that, and that's totally valid as well. or, they can't even watch the movie anymore, that's fine. But
Yeah.
like even before all that, like I thought like it's totally fine when, and you know what? The Oscars always disappoint me. My favorites never win. So this was my first big Oscar disappointment.
We've talked about this. I like much better when my favorites don't win, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
When I like the movie, I don't want
to think about it. Yeah. Yeah. So
'Cause-
now when I say like my favorite movie is Saving Private Ryan, they're like, people are just like, well, first they're surprised because I don't actually talk about it that much, that it's my favorite movie. And like they don't, especially people I meet, they don't think like I would like this movie for some reason. But like people always assume that I'm upset that it lost. I'm like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. And I love Shakespeare in Love as well.
So best director, I don't think we have to spend that much time on it because this one they got right, Joyce. Steven Spielberg wins best director. Roberto Benigni is a nominee here again. Just what? John Madden for Shakespeare in Love, Terrence Malick for The Thin Red Line, and Peter Weir for The Truman Show. Love Steven Spielberg winning for this. I thought his speech was great. I do think he was actually nervous going in because I think the way the night had played out, while he had won this directing award pretty much everywhere and was the favorite, it did feel like maybe he wasn't going to win. I did actually watch, even knowing what happened, I was like, man, John Madden really could have won this, and I would not have been shocked.
I don't think John Madden won any directing awards.
No, but I mean, the way the night plays out, it's just like, oh man, John Madden's going to win this. Like, you really think he might. And it's a great movie, like we said, and it does a great job directing. I think the performances especially are like what's notable on Shakespeare in Love. Steven Spielberg winning here, obviously. It's like one of his tremendous, one of many remarkable achievements.
Very deserved win. And he shouts out his dad, who's a veteran.
Really nice. He goes back and hugs his dad when he goes up to win. It's so sweet. Actually, that made me tear up too.
And like, if you don't know, like they have a very complicated relationship that will be dramatized this year in The Fabelmans.
Yes.
Paul Dano plays his dad.
Next best director nomination. Get Paul Dano an Oscar. Julia Butters, FYC, for his sister.
Your ridiculously early Oscar prediction, Julia Butters.
So the directors I wrote down as possibilities, I think watching how it played out, I think if one person was going to get nominated who wasn't here, so you could say maybe it's Shakar Kapoor for Elizabeth, because that was the Best Picture nominee, and they were not nominated for Best Picture. But I actually thought Bill Condon would have gotten in here for Gods and Monsters.
Yeah, and he also feels like that type of idiosyncratic director's pick.
Same. I thought the same thing. So I was like, I actually think he would be sixth here. And then the hope dicting trio that I have were Wes Anderson for Rushmore would have never happened. Steven Soderbergh for Out of Sight would have never happened. And truly, this one I could really make a case for. Spike Lee for He Got Game. What a great movie. Absolutely awesome Spike Lee movie. And obviously, like, at a time when the Academy was not very much into Spike Lee at all, should have got nominated here. I think he's definitely better than most of these nominees for this category.
I mean, yeah, I would be fine with that, but that was not happening.
No. Who else did you think for this besides Bill Condon?
I mostly had Bill because I thought like, that was, and then with like Elizabeth and like Shakar Kapoor, I don't think he was ever getting in.
It felt like he was not considered seriously for whatever reason.
But had he gotten in, I'll just be like, so they just nominated like the Best Picture director, So and I think it was like too early for someone like Wes,
Yeah, for sure. And in the Inside Oscar, they talk about how they Touchstone kind of botched the release of that. It was released in a platform release for 1 week in December. It's funny because we definitely saw that in the theater. I remember like being so excited for Rushmore because the trailer was awesome. It looked like just like the most fun. Movie rules. It still rules. Watched recently. And yeah, I was just like so into it, but it definitely felt like movie's too cool for an Oscar, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. Best actor, Joyce. Holy shit. Well,
I have a quote I want to read after we get through this.
The nominees were Roberto Benigni for Life is Beautiful, Tom Hanks for Saving Private Ryan, Ian McKellen for Gods and Monsters, Nick Nolte for Affliction, and Edward Norton for American History X. 4 incredible performers doing incredible performances, and Roberto Benigni wins Best Actor. Just, oh man, what a miss. This is such a miss.
Yeah, And yeah, he worked for it, and he got it.
So
And
he had won
yeah,
previously in the night for best foreign language film at the time, which is now best international feature. Sophia Loren gives him the award, and he gets up on his seat. Steven Spielberg has to hold him up from falling at that point. He gets up there. It's a whole big kind of combines like the Cuba Gooding speech with like every like just he's just yelling and just so like, he's like, I don't know how enough, but he's like speaking in broken
yeah,
English
he
and
opens with like,
everything.
I ran out like all the English I have,
So
like
then when he went,
suggesting, but like he's like pretty fluent in English.
yes, so
And,
that's
like I know it's a joke, but like, but
right.
that was part of the persona that he had crafted, right?
Yes. So he
Yeah.
gets up here for the best actor. He's like, I ran out of words. And then he proceeds to give a speech that's very effusive and stuff. Based on this list of nominees, he would not have been
I
my,
mean, Ian McKellen all the way.
I think Tom Hanks. I think this is a miss for Tom Hanks because
Listen,
he didn't win here because he had won twice very
yes,
recently.
yes. Like I love Saving Private Ryan. I love Tom Hanks's performance in Saving Private Ryan because it's also not a very Tom Hanksy performance. Like it's very controlled and restrained because that's
Yes.
the type of captain that John Miller was. And I also I'm gonna invoke Avengers Endgame now,
Please.
because when I saw that, and you know, it's now become a meme, but at the end when old Steve Rogers gives the shield to Sam, and then like Sam sees like his wedding ring and he's like, you want to tell me about her? And he's like, no, I don't think I will. It's like a whole meme now. I'm like, Tom Hanks did it
Tom Hanks
first
did it first. Yeah.
in Saving Private Ryan, after Matt Damon tells this whole story about his brothers that he improvised. And then he asks Tom, like, tell me about your wife and her rose bushes. And Tom is just like, no, I'm going to keep that one to myself. Like,
It's great.
He did it first, guys.
It's an incredible performance. He didn't win because he had just won twice, basically.
Yeah, he was not going to win a third Oscar in 5 years.
But the problem is he is not real. I mean, he should have maybe won for Castaway when we do that year. We could talk about that. Like
he was filming or like getting ready to film Castaway when
he was because he has the beard. But I'm like, this was such a like now we've gone 20 plus years without giving Tom Hanks a third Oscar. And it just feels like this guy should have 3 Oscars.
It took him 19 years to get another nomination after Castaway.
It just really does feel like a missed opportunity. I mean, like, I think if this was nowadays, Ian McKellen, absolutely the film Twitter pick, right? And certainly a well-deserving winner. Hard to imagine the movie working without him. It's a great performance. And
someone else who should be a winner by now.
So it does feel like a missed opportunity. Nick Nolte for Affliction, solid performance, very dark movie, kind of depressing movie that won for James Coburn, as we'll talk about. Fine with him not winning. And Edward Norton, I really love this nomination. I love this performance at the time. Another movie I've not revisited in very long, so I can't guess it hasn't aged incredibly well based on the topic and the subject matter. But it's a great performance. He was so good in it. And I remember really being excited about Edward Norton because this was the year he had this and Rounders, which was a fave.
I love Rounders. Oh my gosh.
The people I wrote down, and then Roberto Benigni. I have really again, the 4 are amazing. And the winner I would not have even nominated if it was up to me, because I think there are other people who could have gotten in here.
Like Jim Carrey, who won the Globe. Carrey
is the obvious one. He was seemingly a favorite for so long, and it was like his big play at being a serious actor. I have not watched Truman Show in a very long time. I remember thinking it was perfectly adequate, and I think he's quite good in it, but I'm not ever broken up that he wasn't nominated, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't feel like he needed to be nominated. I think if you're looking at this with the colored glasses of 2022, the actor I actually would have nominated is Jeff Bridges for Big Lebowski here. It's an all-time
I would have done it then.
All-time performance, truly a iconic, like
just quoted all the time. That's just
incredibly quotable, incredibly funny, just a totally memorable performance. Probably his best performance, even though obviously he won for Crazy Heart. I think he should have gotten nominated. I think it would have been him, but he wasn't even really considered seriously when this was happening. So
no, and like, he wasn't even nominated for the Globe for comedy.
No, totally forgotten. The movie came out, I think, in March, right, of this year. So, or the year before, obviously. So it was like not the most top of mind, I guess I would say.
Yeah, but this was, so the Globes went to Jim Carrey in drama, which was like kind of a surprise because it was, people thought like Ian McKellen would get it, and then like Jim would win the next year for Man on the Moon.
Right.
And then the comedy musical one went to Michael Caine for Little Boys.
Right.
So, but then SAG comes. It's the fifth year of SAG, and well, Critics' Choice also gave it to Ian McKellen for Gods and Monsters and Apt Pupil, another great performance from him. Bryan Singer, that's a whole different story.
That was a really rough, also, like, even at the time, I mean, this is before Bryan Singer, obviously, also another problematic figure of 90s Hollywood. That movie at the time was like cloaked in incredible controversy, right? I mean, I feel like that was like a big runner about it. So yeah, but he was
a
good.
lot of the stuff, the issues that stemmed from the production involves Bryan Singer. So, and Brad Renfro, R.I.P. And then SAG comes along and gives it to Roberto Benigni, and then it was, just could not stop this train. And everyone knew, like all the other nominees knew, they were losing to him. So my favorite story of this night, or like this category, is that Nick Nolte, Ian McKellen, and Ed Norton went to the bar to drink after they lost because they knew they were going to lose. And Nick Nolte like shared this story like 10 years ago when he was nominated again for Warrior. So I have this quote I'm going to read.
I can't wait.
He says, "And the night of the Academy Awards, Ian said, 'Nick, I don't care if you get it or if I get it or if some kid with a bald head and tattoos gets it. But if that little fucking Italian guy gets it, I'm going to have a shit fit tonight.' I said, 'Okay, that's good. I'm with you on that.' And then we're sitting there and they go, 'Roberto Benigni.' And he's doing his bit, walking over the chairs. I look over and I saw Ed was gone and Ian was gone. So I got out of the chair, I walked off, and I knew they'd be at the bar. As I walked up to Ian, he said, 'Nolte, I don't know why you thought you'd get an award. You only play yourself.' And Ian was playing a gay guy, so I said, 'Look who's calling the kettle black.' And we both turned on Ed and said, 'What, did you think you'd win just because you shaved your head and got tattoos?' And Ed said, 'Well, I'm just proud to be here with you guys.' And we laughed and had a great time.
Couldn't have said it better myself. What a great moment.
Hank's not invited, but that's okay. He's doing fine.
He had to sit he couldn't get up. I mean, they showed Hanks. He had to Tom Hanks is president of Hollywood, basically. He has to sit there and like grin and bear it. Yeah. Nothing against Roberto Benigni. He might be a lovely man. Obviously at the time, like we said, the world was caught up in Life is Beautiful mania. But wow, this one is just an instantaneous fail, I think, is a win. I was just like, especially with these other four nominees, it's such a good category.
Yeah. So, another one people might want to redo.
I think they would redo that one. I will say, like, looking at it now, like we said, Hanks probably didn't win because he had won previously. Ian McKellen, I think, should have won. And I think there maybe was an idea that, well, kind of like Judi Dench style, he'll just win at some point in the next year, like when she lost for Mrs. Brown, never materialized. Nolte.
Yeah, he was nominated for Lord of the Rings, the first one, Fellowship, and hasn't been nominated since.
And with Ed Norton, I do think there's also like an idea that, well, he was nominated for Primal Fear, nominated here, we'll just get him again. And he didn't get nominated again, I don't think, until Birdman, which he was great in.
Yeah.
But, and doesn't feel like he feels like an actor who maybe should have gotten an Oscar in one of these 90s ceremonies and did not. And now it's like, well, is he ever going to get one? I don't know. Like, Edward Norton doesn't do as much. He's more picky, I feel like, with his material. So
yeah. So
best actress
like
choice.
Missed opportunities.
It was missed opportunities for Roberto Benigni. But again, that's what happens when you vote, like in the heat of the campaigning and being told how great this is, and you get the VHS tapes and you're feeling great about getting all his access. Best actress, Gwyneth Paltrow wins for Shakespeare in Love. Like I said, the speech made me just weep. Such a great speech, and it's such a great moment. And I know it's tainted because of obviously what happened with Harvey, but I guess I was like naively like, man, I hope she doesn't feel like it's tainted because it is such a wonderful moment for her to win. And like, I think her performance is so good. So I'm sure she's conflicted about it, but she's so great. Cate Blanchett for Elizabeth was the nominee, seemingly the film Twitter pick probably at the time. There was Twitter.
Fernanda Montenegro would be the film Twitter pick.
Fernanda Montenegro was nominated for Central Station. Meryl Streep for One True Thing, which is actually a really solid, I think, weepy drama. I enjoyed that one. And Emily Watson for Hillary and Jackie. The nominees. So first, let me add you. Do you think Gwyneth winning is bad? Because I feel like that's another one that people are like kind of.
No, I'm totally fine with her winning. Yeah,
she's great in
a very good win.
So great. She's so great in the movie. The and again, this is another one where I'm like, I don't know who you knock out. I guess Meryl for One True Thing, just because it's like it felt like one of those like Meryl gets nominated performances rather than like we need to nominate somebody. So I was looking at the people I came up with for Best Actress who I would have put in were Cameron Diaz for Something About Mary and Christina Ricci for Opposite of Sex. They category for Christina Ricci, I think, in one of these ceremonies and put her in supporting, or was it one of the critics groups did that? I forget which one it was.
No, she was nominated in lead at the Globes, Christina.
Okay.
Because like Lisa Kudrow was getting the supporting notices, and I would have nominated her.
She was so great in the movie too.
Yeah.
And so we talked about this a little bit last week. Cameron Diaz in Something About Mary is like an incredible performance. She's so funny.
And she won New York.
She won the New York Film Critics Circle, and in the Inside Oscar, they make a big. Basically, it was we want her to come to our dinner, which I think is like really reductive.
The Lady Gaga of '98.
Again, it felt like the Lady Gaga of '98 because it was like a lot of people in Lady Gaga one were like they want her to come to the dinner, and so that's why she won, and she didn't really deserve it. I find that a little reductive just because I'm like, she is great. Like Lady Gaga was great in House of Gucci. I have no problem with that win. It also happens to be that she's super famous, but sometimes when you're a famous movie star and you give a great performance, you shouldn't be penalized or thought of as like, basically like, you know, I don't know, fodder for getting a famous person at your party. So Cameron Diaz won New York Film Critics Circle. I think that's a great win, and she's so good in the movie. The movie is very funny. I'm sure it hasn't aged incredibly well either. I've not seen it in a long time. I could think of at least one or two things that are incredibly problematic.
I saw it in a theater with my parents, and like we were all just rolling. Yeah, my parents took me to see like whatever. It didn't matter. Like
I saw with
a lot of inappropriate movies with my parents probably.
I saw it with one of my buddies, and I could not remember laughing as hard as I found it. So it was probably
hilarious.
Like, just like probably what was I, 20 years old. So like very in the pocket.
I was 13
and just howling laughing at it. It's so funny, but also, she was incredibly good.
One of my favorite quotes in Inside Oscar, not about Something About Mary, but about Saving Private Ryan and like how like visceral and brutal D-Day is. And there's like a quote from Steven Spielberg saying like, yeah, I don't think if you're under 14 you should see it. I was 13. I'm like, Steven, come on. Like, why can't 14-year-olds see this movie? Like, it's war, it's brutal, but yeah.
So I would have put her in. I guess I would have knocked Meryl Streep out, though that robs you of a moment when Gwyneth Paltrow gets to like shout out Meryl Streep, and it honestly they cut to Meryl and Meryl's doing like, oh, but like I was almost like, I
think she couldn't hear her.
I also wonder had she ever met Meryl at that time? Like it almost felt like it was like, oh, like nowadays you think Gwyneth Paltrow is like it's super famous person. I'm sure she's like got able to talk to Meryl Streep if she wants, like on text or whatever. However famous people talk, Joyce. Maybe through Instagram DM. I don't even know.
I'm sure she's probably met her at one of the events.
I guess so.
Yeah. So she also said like my friend Kate Blanchett, because they had just done Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yes. Great time. And her other friend Ben Affleck, who I think they were together.
Yeah, they had just broken up, but then they would go on to make Bounce. Yeah.
Right. Bounce with Don Roos, who is popped here with Opposite of Sex. I haven't seen Opposite of Sex in a very long time. Same. But I did really, really love it at the time. I thought it was so funny. That was when I saw on VHS. I did not get to the theater for that. We were not getting a lot of the indie releases at the time in the local theaters. But it's incredibly funny, very, very caustic and sarcastic humor. And I was a big fan of Christina Ricci, obviously, and Lisa Kudrow from Friends, just like a home run. And she's very funny.
Yeah, well, that was why I was like rooting for Lisa, because I'm a huge Friends fan.
I know, yeah.
So, yeah. And I wanted her to get in.
The best supporting actor goes to James Coburn for Affliction. It's the first award of the night. The other nominees were Robert Duvall for A Civil Action, Ed Harris for Truman Show, Jeffrey Rush for Shakespeare in Love, a return nominee after Shine, and then Billy Bob Thornton for A Simple Plan, a return nominee after Sling Blade. I have notes.
Also a rematch between the two of them.
I have notes on this one, Joyce.
You have feelings.
I have a lot of notes. So the obvious one, current controversies aside, Bill Murray for Rushmore felt like should have got nominated here. But it was a comeback for Bill Murray after doing a bunch of junk. And I think people weren't ready to take him super seriously as an actor. And we saw that they end up doing that by the time Lost in Translation comes out. But this starts the Bill Murray like renaissance, basically, of like serious actor Bill Murray after like Operation Dumbo dropped Bill Murray. Or he wasn't even, what was the one he was in? The Man Who Wasn't There or whatever. You know what I mean? Like just a lot of junky 90s movies. So I would have nominated him. And no offense to Robert Duvall and his Civil Action, but that would be one I would punt out. I don't think.
Well, he wasn't even there.
No.
So yeah.
The other person I wrote down was Ed Norton for Rounders.
I love Rounders.
And legendary performance. Incredibly good. Worm is such a great character. Norton kills it. And I think he should have gotten nominated, a double nominee for this year for American History X and Rounders. And then I think they got the wrong Shakespeare in Love actor, as much as I think Jeffrey Rush.
Ben Affleck.
I think Ben Affleck should have got nominated. Jeffrey Rush is actually like in it a lot. He's like a key factor. He's a producer in the movie. So I think that like plays into the joke. And like a lot of people were like, you know, infatuated with that portrayal. But wow, Ben Affleck, like playing
my friends and I quote when he comes in, he's like, what is the play and what is my part?
He's so good. He's so funny. His anachronistic acting style actually works really well for the movie and the tone. Mm-hmm. It's a great performance. I think it's one of his best performances, and I would have loved to see him nominated.
Yes.
The other people I wrote down, tell me if you have anybody else, Alan Arkin for The Slums of Beverly Hills, which is like a preview of his Little Miss Sunshine performance. It's exactly the same, I would argue, but like a few years earlier. John Malkovich for Rounders, just as a big scenery chewing performance, though I prefer Edward Norton. And again, another canceled film, whatever, Leonardo DiCaprio for Celebrity, his incredibly fun performance from Leo in that movie, playing the movie version of Leo, kind of like very meta performance that I quite enjoyed at the time.
Mm-hmm. The only person I would add is Gene Hackman from one of my favorite movies of 1998, Enemy of the State. Which is
wow.
all time, like Tony Scott, like peak Tony Scott. I love that movie so much. Watch it all the time in pay-per-view.
Wait,
like,
every movie.
He's like he and Will Smith, our fave. Great chemistry between them, and like he was just like Gene Hackman, looked so cool, and it was like such an easy performance, like easy in a good way, like easygoing, and like it felt like it fit him to a T. And yeah, I was obsessed with that movie. So, and then he retired like 4 years later. But
it's an incredible,
such a fun movie.
Really fun. Every movie we bring up, Joyce, there's a landmine of some person who has been canceled or done something bad. So, of course, we got to Will Smith.
We got Will Smith, and also John Boyd is in this movie. So,
but he's so great. Anyway, I love the part when it's like, because you made a phone call. I love Gene Hackman had played pissed off.
Oh my god, and I love the runner with Will Smith's blunder. Oh god.
Gene Hackman was the greatest pissed off actor. I know obviously he's still with us, but he's long retired.
He's retired.
The greatest pissed off actor in the world.
Mm-hmm.
He's so mad and he plays outrage so well. I just love him so much.
I want to watch Enemy of the State now.
I'll tell you one. I'll tell you this story because we're talking about Gene Hackman. I got to find it. But Ben Stiller did a charity thing a few years ago for something he did. It was a movie a parody movie he wrote at like the time of like the Ben Stiller show called like The Towering Disaster. Is all about Poseidon Adventure and how he was like obsessed with Poseidon Adventure as a kid and he loved it so much. It's like one of the reasons he went into acting. And when he was doing Royal Tenenbaums, which I think when we get to that, if we continue this and we get to that, I think Gene Hackman should have probably won that year, but Ben was like worked with Gene Hackman every day. Was the stories from that set are that they were all really intimidated by Gene Hackman because like he's just so cantankerous and like no does not suffer fools. So Ben Stiller was like finally got up the nerve to go up to Gene Hackman to tell him about Poseidon Adventure, and this is what he said. I'll read this. I did this like 2 years ago. So he was like, 2 days before the shoot was over, finally there's this quiet moment, and I said, Gene, I just want to say it's been amazing working with you. And I didn't say this before, but really for me, Poseidon Adventure is probably one of the most important movies for me ever because it really made me want to be a filmmaker, to be in movies. And I saw it multiple times and it really just changed my life. And as Ben Stiller says, Gene Hackman paused and looked at him and was like, oh yeah, Money Job, and that was it. He just left, just got up and left the conversation. And
I mean, what else did there say? Mic drop.
Nothing else. Just amazing. Ben Stiller spent 30 years being like, man, this is such an inspiring movie for me. And Gene Hackman's like,
but I feel like that happens all the time. It's like the things that you love and like, hold dear, like to them, it's just like another job.
Yeah,
like a
money
paycheck.
job.
Yeah.
Gene Hackman's the best. I totally support him being nominated here. But none of these people were nominated, Joyce. You end up with a list of less than inspiring nominees. I think, I don't know. All of these performances are fine. Robert Duvall for Civil Action, like I said, the movie was like kind of a this had Oscar buzz vibe to it. Steve Zalian directed it. John Travolta was in it. Totally fine, kind of like a courtroom thriller, like whatever. Billy Bob in A Simple Plan, I think would have been a nice winner. James Coburn, obviously a legendary actor, kind of had a fall, like his career faded. He came back. This is a comeback win for him in Affliction, and then he died shortly after, like you were saying last night. And
it was very this is weirdly, I remember like going online when he died in 2002. It like I can still picture it, and I read that he died on E! News, like on E! Online. Wow. I can still picture it, and it's also sad because he gives a shout out to his wife at the end of his speech, and she died 2 years after he did of cancer. So it's sad all around. But this one is cool. I know you're not a fan of this one, but I think it's cool because he won no precursors and he wasn't nominated anywhere. And you just like don't get that anywhere these days. So the precursors were split. So BAFTA was still after the Oscars at this point, but Ed Harris won the Globe, and Billy Bob won Critics' Choice, and Robert Duvall won SAG. So it was a split race. And then James Coburn comes in and wins it. And it's also interesting because like in like the previous 2 years, we saw like these legends like Lauren Bacall and like Burt Reynolds lose, right? But they gave it to James Coburn.
It's funny because I wonder, I have stipulated that I'm like, the Academy is actually not as sentimental as you think. The performance is so unsentimental. He's playing such an
he's an asshole.
Total asshole. And also like, because he was not really, they weren't really pushing it's time narrative for James Coburn, right? Like you said,
he was a surprise.
So it was kind of just like, it naturally occurred that they were like, I want to honor James Coburn rather than being told I have to honor James Coburn, right? Like kind of like they were doing with Lauren Bacall, perhaps.
Yeah, because I think he got it at SAG, right? I think he did. Let me see.
I don't remember.
But he didn't. I think that was his only precursor. He didn't get in at Globes. Yeah, so he got it at SAG. So Robert Duvall won that. Yeah, because it wasn't like we need to give it to him. Because Lauren was sweeping.
Right.
And Burt had won the Globe. So yeah, he didn't win anything.
Right.
And it was split. So maybe like he was just a beneficiary of that. It was like no one had a consensus choice.
No.
And it's like this kind of like this legendary new in the race face, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For supporting actress choice, Judi Dench wins famously for Shakespeare in Love. She's in it for 8 minutes. Love her speech. She's like, it's just 8 minutes, but like she's very, very kind, and it's a great speech. The other nominees were Kathy Bates for Primary Colors, Brenda Blethyn for Little Voice, Rachel Griffiths for Hillary and Jackie, and Lynn Redgrave for Gods and Monsters. I don't have a problem with Judi Dench winning in that lineup. I actually think that's a really strong lineup, but the people I flagged as two actually actresses who were very much in the race, or Lisa Kudrow, like we said, for Opposite of Sex, and Joan Allen for Pleasantville. I was kind of surprised that neither one of them got in. I assume that like Brenda Blethyn and Rachel Griffiths took their spots, I guess. I don't know. What do you think? And also earlier I said Brenda Blethyn was the best actress nominee, but it was supporting actress, so sorry.
I mean, Brenda got in everywhere.
Right.
So yeah, I get it would be like, yeah, Rachel for Hillary and Jackie, I guess. But if you're replacing two,
I don't know. I mean, like Lynn Redgrave is so good in Gods and Monsters.
Like maybe Kathy won SAG, but that also just feels kind of like they like Kathy Bates, and I don't know if that role was really like a stretch for her in Primary Colors.
Right.
But yeah, I would have done like Lisa Kudrow definitely, and Joan Allen was great. So someone else who feels like should have an Oscar by now.
And I think nominated a couple years for The Contender, right? Was that another nomination for her?
In 2 years.
2 years.
In 2000. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, Judy winning, like we talked about last week, she lost for Mrs. Brown in lead to Helen Hunt, and this was like the makeup Oscar.
I'll tell you what though, if it was between Helen Hunt winning for As Good as It Gets and Judi Dench winning for Shakespeare in Love, or Judi Dench winning for Mrs. Brown and like one of these other actresses winning here, I think we have a better. I like Helen Hunt and Judi Dench. I like that
match.
Yeah, I do. I think it's good. I'm like, I would not take away Helen Hunt's Oscar.
No, and like Judy is great in Shakespeare in Love, and yeah, like she's only in it for 8 minutes and she references that. I also really love her speech because she talks about what I think is actually true and how the best part of the Oscars is just being nominated because you're just around your peers and these people in the industry celebrating work, and it sucks that one of them has to win.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really great speech.
And obviously Robin Williams, like a great winner announcement, like there's nothing like a dame, and then like her reaction, she's like, she just know it's her, she's the only dame in the
so good. It's really great. Let's go. We'll wrap up here shortly, but the screenplay wins went to Shakespeare in Love for original screenplay, and Gods and Monsters for adapted screenplay. The other nominees for original were Bulworth, Life is Beautiful, Saving Private Ryan, and The Truman Show. Again, some notes. Just I think I had Big Lebowski and Rushmore as original screenplay nominees.
I would nominate Big Lebowski.
But
I don't think the industry was ready for the Coens follow-up to Fargo being Big Lebowski. That's the thing.
And I think the whole response, it's funny, like in Inside Oscar, they talk about how like Truman Show didn't really work for the industry because it was a critics movie and the critics really liked it, and that the industry was like, I don't care. And I felt like for Big Lebowski, at least at the time, Fargo was such a humongous critical winner and obviously like won Oscars, that when it came out and it was just like a basic, it's a very smart and well-made movie, but it's like a stoner comedy, right? Like it's a stupid stoner comedy at times. People were just like, this is like a huge step back for them. And even critically, I don't think the response at the time was commensurate with what it is now. Because now I think it's like thought of as one of like the great movies of like the 90s.
There are a lot of films from this year that were not like widely embraced at the time, but have now become cult classics.
Right. Yeah, I don't have a problem with Shakespeare in Love winning. Like I said, I think the script's really good. And Gods and Monsters is a very cool win. It beat Out of Sight, Primary Colors, A Simple Plan, and The Thin Red Line.
Yeah, Gods and Monsters, no notes on that. Shakespeare in Love, I'm totally fine with too. Like I think it's a very well written movie, and like to get that iambic pentameter and just like the way of speaking at that time, I think they did a really good job. And yeah, I think like people now would probably want to give it to The Truman Show. That would have been fine as well. Saving Private Ryan, I love the movie, but the script not one of its strong suits, and it underwent a lot of rewrites as well.
I also like one of these ones where you could have easily imagined not even getting nominated, Titanic style, for its script.
I mean, it's not that bad. Like the script is still good, and I think it does a really good job of like fleshing out the characters, like the troupe. Like I feel like you really know each member, like all 8 guys.
Who's your favorite guy?
Okay, so at the time, my favorite guy was Jackson the sniper, played by Barry Pepper, who's also
he was a
in
breakout, surely.
Yeah, I love Barry Pepper, and he needs to do more stuff, man. Come back, Barry Pepper. And because like the sniper is the coolest, right? But I know like I can never be the sniper. And now like I have more of appreciation of Upham, like Jeremy Davies' character, because he's us basically, like because he's the translator who's like recruited to go along with them, and he only fires his gun or his rifle once in the movie at the end to kill Steamboat Willie, who like killed Tom Hanks after Tom Hanks let him go earlier after Giovanni Ribisi died. So I feel like you get to like they're kind of stock characters, but the script actually accomplishes so much with like their interactions and just little moments between them, like during their downtime and their conversations, that you really get to know each and every one of them. And it's really sad watching all of them die. Like
it is.
my Giovanni Ribisi's death is really sad when he like asks for more morphine. And I love the way they shot it as well, because you don't know at first like who's been hit. And like Vin Diesel is the first one who dies after like rescuing a little girl. Also, like when the first Fast and Furious was coming out like 3 years later, I was like, oh, it's like Caparzo. So I think of Vin Diesel as Adrian Caparzo before Dom Toretto. But the toughest death for me to watch is Adam Goldberg's, because he gets slowly stabbed in the heart. I'm like, ugh, just
really
crushing.
tough.
Yeah.
My favorite was Ed Burns. Not a surprise, probably to you at
like,
all.
Yeah, Brooklyn, and then like one of the two who survives.
It's great, so good in it. I love it.
But also, this film is very funny, like low key funny. Like when Jeremy Davies like drops his typewriter and asks Tom Hanks if he could bring his typewriter, or like when Paul Giamatti sits down to like take a stone out of his shoe and he just like knocks over the wall. But like when I was watching last night, like during the final battle, like Tom Hanks is like run over to check on Matt Damon. He's like, Ryan, you okay? You okay? And Ed Burns is right there, and he's like, yeah, I'm okay too, Captain.
So good. Joyce, we should wrap up, but I know you want to talk about the song category.
The song category, not full of bangers like the previous year, but still one definite absolute banger. I Don't Want to Miss a Thing.
So another one. How the hell do we not give Diane Warren a goddamn Oscar for I Don't Want to Miss a Thing? This is so clearly an Oscar win. Like,
and then I still remember watching like Aerosmith perform it live, and I was just like I know they didn't write the song, but I'm just like the song has to win. Like, and I was like, obviously it was like a huge hit and everything. And a couple years ago, I talked to Justin Tranter, who's a songwriter, and he was like completely outraged that Diane Warren did not win for the song. He's like, this is like my favorite song from a film. He's like, I don't know who won, but this should have won. And the winner was When You Believe from The Prince of Egypt, by Stephen Schwartz, performed by Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston.
Right. So you get the Murderers Row of the divas performing it at the time, right? But like,
yeah, and they performed on the show. The performance is online. You can watch it. But Stephen Schwartz not there, so this birthed like the meme, because J-Lo presents this category. So it's just kind of like, I don't know her, like, you know, like what 10 years prior, but then she says like Stephen Schwartz is not here, but it cuts to Mariah and Whitney in the audience, and like that's when Whitney's like looking around for like Stephen Schwartz.
Third year in a row they have J-Lo presenting, by the way, at the Oscars. Couldn't nominate her for Out of Sight.
Also the third year in a row that Celine Dion is performing.
Yes, didn't reference her for Out of Sight.
Yeah, for Quest, for Camelot. Yeah, J-Lo, she would have been a great nominee. I think that's probably her best performance in Out of Sight. I actually thought that for a while, but I legitimately think Hustlers is like an incredible movie, and she should have got nominated for that. She's so good at it. It's just a great performance. The score categories, which we love, they had two at the time. So the Shakespeare in Love theme, like we talked about, just prevalent throughout the show. It's an incredible score. Stephen Warbeck wins in musical comedy score against A Bug's Life, Mulan, Patch Adams, and The Prince of Egypt. Wow. Just wow. And then dramatic score goes to Life is Beautiful over John Williams' Saving Private Ryan score. I mean, what are we doing, guys? Like, what is happening? I don't know. Randy Newman was a double nominee, lost twice. Pleasantville score, another winner. Elizabeth and The Thin Red Line were the other nominees in dramatic score. Yeah, and they did the interpretive dance, not for the comedy score nominees, but for the dramatic score nominees. And some of the pieces, it's online, some questionable pieces to choreograph to.
Yeah. And Debbie Allen, future Grey's Anatomy star and director and producer, I believe, in the crowd, very approvingly watching the dancers that she helped choreograph, I believe, at the time. Joyce, we should wrap up, but then we didn't even talk about Elia Kazan gets his honorary Oscar.
Presented by his biggest stan, Martin Scorsese, and Robert De Niro, who was clearly in the middle of filming Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yes, Robert De Niro has the most laughable haircut from Rocky and Bullwinkle. And De Niro and Scorsese, they give out this honorary Oscar to Elia Kazan. Going into the show, it was a humongous controversy. There were protests outside. I mean, they said like 500 people were protesting. some of the signs that were out there. Elia Kazan nominated for the Benedict Arnold Award. This is from an LA Times article in 1999. Don't whitewash the blacklist. And Elia Kazan, quote, the Linda Tripp of the 1950s. So that's the tone of the discourse at the time. He wins, and or he gets this award. Scorsese and De Niro kind of do it. We talked about Chris Rock actually comes out prior to this and is just on fire. Makes a joke about Robert De Niro. It doesn't like rats, and it just is like so funny. It's just so good.
The audience, very mixed reaction from the audience at that
for
joke.
Robert for the Kazan or for Chris Rock?
The rats joke.
Yeah, definitely. Chris Rock rubbing people the wrong way at the Oscars for 25 years and counting, I guess.
But no one came up on stage to slug him. So.
No, De Niro did not come out there. And then, it's Scorsese and De Niro present like a little package about Elia Kazan, obviously like one of the directing some of the most incredible movies ever, basically, and some of the greatest performances of all time. And then Elia Kazan comes out and gets a mixed response, I would say. A lot of people
remember this vividly because I had followed the controversy, obviously, and it was like there were protests and everything, and not everyone was happy with this choice. Also kind of unnecessary too, because he's already an Oscar winner. You don't need to double down on this.
Right. It felt like
give an honor Oscar to people who don't have one.
Right. It felt like poking the bear a little bit from the Academy.
And but that if you could watch the clip online, because when he comes out on stage like with his wife, just kind of like and like arms raised, and it's like it's not even half standing O, it's maybe like a quarter standing O. And then some people are just kind of like Steven Spielberg, just kind of politely clapping, but you can tell he's not happy to be. This is what we've talked about before, is like, do these people feel pressured to applaud and clap when they know, or like they personally don't feel like they should be doing peer pressure?
Yeah, again, this is another presage of like this year's Oscars with like Will Smith getting like a standing ovation or a response after the slap, right? And like even like obviously Roman Polanski, if we get to that one, was like another
he got a
full standing up.
Yeah, this one like not even full standing up, but some people stood up, like Meryl stood up, but people who did not stand up or clap: Ed Harris, Amy Madigan, Nick Nolte, like
just absolutely
like arms crossed.
It's pretty remarkable. And then his speech is very short, and just like, I really like to hear that. He says of the applause, I want to thank the Academy for its courage and generosity. I'm pleased to say what's best about them. They're damn good to work with. And then he like tries to get Martin Scorsese like hiding behind him, which I found so funny. And then he's like trying to get Marty to come up. Martin Scorsese's like, I don't want to do that. I'm already having a tough time trying to win one of these myself. I don't need more people not liking me.
And like people already don't like that I'm doing this for you.
So like, keep me out of this. But he comes up and gives him a hug. And Scorsese's like, Bobby's here too. Make sure you say hi to Bobby. That was so funny again. And then it just ends, and that's it. So that was the
the big controversy.
That was the big controversy. Now, well, how quaint that was the controversy. Not to downplay anybody's feelings about the Red Scare.
I also don't think they would select him as a recipient today. Like if this were happening now, or if they did, they would. I guess it'll be tough to rescind it. They would have to go through with it. I guess I don't know. You could tell they were just kind of like, like a legendary director, and like he outed his like colleagues for no reason really,
right?
40 years ago. So
and then that's it. So that's the Oscars, Joyce. They wrap it up. Movie says bye. 45 million people watch, and the day after, it's like, what are we gonna do about the Oscars? Only 45 million people watched. We have to fix this. No one wants to host.
Like we moved it on a Sunday because more people will be home, so more people could watch, and they did it.
And then it's a big disaster. So we'll come back. I mean, we could keep going on these two. Do you want to go? What do you want to do next week? We have not talked.
I mean, we didn't finish the decade. We
should go back into
like
the
5
90s.
years.
Yeah, maybe we could go back and look at the 90s before we go to the next year. With
like we're just pure. We're not even doing in any order, even though we did the last three in order.
And I got to say, the more we delay, the following year, probably the better, as American Beauty won 5 awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Kevin Spacey. So maybe we'll come back to. We'll get.
Are we going to do both of his wins last?
No, probably not, but we'll figure something out. But Joyce, this was so much fun. So we'll talk soon.